I wanted to mention a few people that influenced me, and while we're busy talking about the writing process, I'll mention William Zinsser. He's an author and a writer of books, not only on effective writing, but also more like a journalist. So he's got a book that visits many national parks, and he talks to the superintendent, and he talks to the janitor, and he talks to the visitor. So he's really a reporter. He taught at Yale for many years, consummate New Yorker. It's Zinsser that I learned most about what I'm about to convey about the writing process. And a quote that I remember from the half a day that I had with him and my group in New Haven, he said, "If you take care of the process, the product will take care of itself." Or in his book called Writing to Learn, my favorite quote is that you can use writing as a tool for thinking. Again, not just a means to disseminate the ideas, but a means to come up with better ideas. Here's how Zinsser describes the initial problem that authors have, again, in those first drafts. He says there's A writers and there are B writers. A writers are very rare. These are the people who don't struggle with the writing process like most of us do. These people have, let's call it, decades of experience of reading good writing and a familiarity with the different structures of the writing. A writer can sit down and say, okay, I'm ready to write my first draft, and that first draft will come out pretty well organized, about as close to a perfect first draft as you can get. But again, decades of experience of familiarity with these different formats. Most of us, Zinsser says, are B writers. We can think about it, we can organize it, we can reflect on it, but no matter what, whenever we start writing, if anything comes out at all, it comes out all mishmashed, and it makes no sense, and it's very discouraging. I mean, we won't even get into procrastination, because procrastination is like the easiest thing to do when you're faced with a writing project. So much easier to check email and do all those tiny, small projects than to take on a big project. The main thing I learned from the many time management classes I've been to is that if you have a big project, the best way to approach it is to divide it up into many smaller projects and just knock off the smaller ones one at a time. So Zinsser's solution to this initial problem with the writing process is to not worry about the final project early on. Don't yet deconstruct that model article, but just go ahead and allow yourself to become a B writer. Do what he calls free writing, and write whatever occurs to you. Maybe don't even write sentences and paragraphs, because sentences and paragraphs are not easy to put together. Just make a laundry list of your ideas. Or I go into faculty offices here at Iowa, and I see 2 or 3 of these whiteboards on the walls, and they have circles and lines and shapes and decision trees and conceptual models, and they're literally living in the realm of their ideas and using those lists and those diagrams as a means to inform their writing. In fact, another person I'll talk about is my buddy Abraham Verghese, who's a physician and a funded investigator, and he's got 2 nonfiction books out, and most recently, about 10 years ago, a novel, 555 pages long, awesome novel called Cutting for Stone. So next time you have a good week on a beach, bring that along with you, Cutting for Stone. Anyway, I walked into his house at Stanford last summer, and he tells me he's always wanted to take his living room and make it into his writing room, and basically that's what it is. His living room is got a gigantic desk and a gigantic whiteboard behind it, about 3 times this size, and not only does he have notes all over it, but he's drawn, in a couple places, pictures of the characters of his novel. So very cool. I told him I wanted a photograph of it, but then if I took a photograph, I'd just be showing it, and so we decided I wouldn't take a picture of it. Back to Zinsser. He says, do free writing. This is essentially this 15 minutes a day, a writing assignment that we've given you. And then after you've collected enough information, then you start to consider your reader. So again, we talk about reader-based writing. And then you start to consider the models that you're expected to write in. And then you say, okay, I said the same thing twice here, and it goes up here, and this goes here, and this thing goes down here, and this goes down here. In other words, important to recognize that there are at least 2 stages of the writing process, at least 2. First one being the way you get your ideas, the intuitive stage, which is pretty random, sometimes mysterious, and then the reorganizing stage for the reader, the didactic stage, the one in which you put those ideas in a format that is rememberable to that reader, that makes sense to the reader. Of course, I'm going to ultimately add a 3rd stage, and that would be when you solicit feedback from your colleagues, from your mentors, from your classmates, to improve the quality of that writing. But that's still down the road a little bit. So again, the point there is recognize that it doesn't come out the best the first time. It takes a number of different stages. And again, Zinsser, writing is a tool for thinking. Another person I want to bring up early on, I mentioned him just now already, is Abraham Verghese. Verghese. And I'll get to his story in a minute. But the idea of keeping a log of your ideas on a daily basis, 15 minutes a day, every day for 49 days, and then rereading all that information, an hour or two it would take you to go through all that information, is one way that you can use writing as a tool for thinking. And I explain this with my Weather Channel analogy. So it's 1988, I moved from New York City to Iowa City, and we get cable TV. And so my favorite channel is the Weather Channel because it would show the Earth from outer space. I mean, I knew it was a computer mock-up, but I thought that was cool. So what the Weather Channel taught me about writing is when they put the radar map in motion. So what, they take 5 hours of radar data and they do a little time lapse, and as a result, you can see the weather patterns happening. My question to you is, if you're in a spaceship in real time looking down in North America, do you get the same insight into the weather that you do in that time-lapse version? No. Why not? Because in real time, those weather patterns move too slowly, right? You need some type of tool to put the map in motion or do a little time lapse on that radar data to see the patterns emerge. My whole point is that because you live your academic life in real time, you need some sort of tool to be able to put the map in motion, as it were, and to see the patterns emerge. And again, if you write a page a day every day in your log for 49 days, and then you read that in the hour or so it takes you to read that, you'll be taking, well, I don't know, 105 minutes times 5 weeks, that's, 500 plus minutes of thinking collapsed into 60 minutes, and you'll be able to see those patterns emerge. That's the whole rationale behind a page a day every day in your log. Much better than putting in 8 hours of writing every Sunday, 5 Sundays in a row. My friend Abraham's story is also illustrative of this. So he was a classmate of mine in the workshop, and his story is pretty unique. He had about 10, 12 years of experience in the real world, being a doctor, before he went on and did this Master of Fine Arts in creative writing. Because he had some experience, actually pretty moving experience as a physician in Tennessee before coming here, he graduates with a book contract, okay? Most of us get an MFA, and as my grandfather would say, that and a token will get you a ride on the subway, right? But Abraham had met some editors here, and he'd done lots of good work, and he graduates with a book contract. And now he's got to write the book. So his story is this. He was raised in Ethiopia to Indian parents who were teachers there. He went to medical school in India, ultimately came to US, did his training here, established himself as a faculty, and he's doing research in pulmonary issues. He's an infectious disease expert. He said he went into infectious diseases because you could cure people. But of course, the HIV epidemic hits, and essentially the sons of Johnson City, Tennessee, come home to die. And this is a very moving experience. His patients are dying on him now. So he has kind of a crisis of career. He turns to writing as a means to deal with it, gets more interested, does a summer writing program here at Iowa, and then ultimately gets his MFA at Iowa, and again, meets this editor, graduates, he's got a book contract, and now he's going to write the book. Well, he's also got to support a family, and they moved to Texas, to El Paso. And I remember him telling the story to me in his office there in Texas, El Paso. He was the head of the residency program in internal medicine. He's got to write the book, so what he does is he sets his alarm clock for 4:30 every morning, and he gets up and he starts typing about his experiences. A couple hours later, showers, goes to the hospital, rounds with the residents, has his day. And the way he put it to me, he said, some days somebody would say something that would trigger a solution to what he had been writing about that morning. And he says he knows it wasn't divine inspiration. He knows it was because he had been sensitizing himself to the issue by writing about it that morning or the previous mornings. Meanwhile, fast forward 20 years, and I'm telling this very story at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and someone in my front right table here says to me, this is what the cognitive psychologists call the incubation of ideas, or the fermentation of ideas, or just pick your favorite process, right? The idea is that if you write a page a day, every day, in the log of your ideas, we're not talking about keeping a diary, we're talking about a log of your professional ideas and aspirations, you will better sensitize yourself and have a better chance to get insights into those ideas. Thinking about getting ideas from your writing, or think about, in general, how we get our ideas, our better ideas, or more precisely, when we get our best ideas. The question is, what were you doing when you last got your best idea? Well, I'll just jump ahead right to the answer. The answer is something else, right? I was biking on the way to class. The number one answer is I was in the shower. How come you get your best ideas in the shower, right? Because you're naked and wet? I don't know. There's a speaker on the emergency medicine circuit, Cordell Jepson, talks about if you get your best ideas in the shower, you should have a set of those wax pencils there on the ledge so you can write them down and before you forget them. That's another question I ask. How many times in the course of your day are you busy doing something else and you do get insight into a particular situation? And you say to yourself, that's pretty insightful of me. I'm going to remember that and write that down later. Then what happens? You never remember that great insight. And almost worse, you never remember you had that moment of understanding at all. Another quality of good writing is the ability to capture that idea when you get it. And now that we have smartphones, it's a lot easier. I used to tell physicians, you go to that nearest phone in the hallway of the hospital and dial your own number and leave yourself a voicemail, right? Now you get notes pages and you send yourself text. There's really no reason to not record that insight when you get it. Okay, so that's some on the writing process, and that's my best case for, by taking a measured approach to the writing process, you can come up with better ideas, and again, at least see where your true interests lie.